There must be some mistake, Madison said with a smile. You're not on the list. That was how I found out I wasn't welcome at my own son's wedding. I stood in the evening light outside Pacific Bluffs Country Club, my fingers clenched too tightly around a small navy clutch. The air carried the smell of salt from the ocean and something sweet from the florist arrangements inside. Through the glass doors came music and laughter, the clink of glasses, the bright, buoyant sounds of celebration. They blurred together while Madison's words settled between us like a wall I couldn't see through. Maybe they put you under a different name? Brooke, the event coordinator, offered gently. She glanced down at the tablet in her hands, swiping as if she were searching. I watched her eyes move and knew it was a performance. There was no other name. There was just me, in sensible shoes and the one nice dress I owned, trying not to look like I was pleading for entry. Madison didn't step aside. Her wedding gown caught the last of the sunset, every bead glowing. She looked immaculate, polished, composed, and when she turned that practiced smile on me, it hurt more than a slap ever could. "Scarlett," she said, and the way she said my name made my skin prickle. "We just thought it would be easier to keep things small, intimate. You know how guest lists can get out of hand." I heard the words, but I heard the meaning beneath them more clearly. Easier without you. Easier without the waitress mother who didn't belong in a country club photograph. Every time she said we, my chest tightened. We meant her and my son, my Dylan. "I'm his mother," I said. My voice came out thinner than I wanted, and I hated that it betrayed me. "I raised him. There has to be some misunderstanding." Brooke shifted and stared at the ground. The valet focused intently on parking another glossy black SUV, though his attention tilted toward us. I felt eyes on my back, curious silhouettes gathering behind the glass. Madison gave a small, airy laugh, as if this were a minor inconvenience. "Of course you're important, Scarlett," she said, and important landed like a patronizing pat. "It's just that the list was finalized months ago. Capacity limits, security, all those rules. We can't just let people walk in because they say they're family." "People, not you, not Mom, just people." Resentment flared in my chest, sharp and hot, battling the instinct to swallow everything down. For a split second, I saw Dylan as a boy, leaning against my arm in the grocery line, promising he'd take me on a real vacation someday. I blinked, and that child was gone, replaced by a woman standing guard at the door to his life. "Did Dylan say that?" I asked. I needed to hear his name, needed to know if this truly came from him. Madison's smile tightened. "We talked about it," she said. "He's under a lot of pressure. We didn't want any distractions." Distractions. The word cut deepest of all. Years of double shifts, aching feet, packing leftover fries for Dylan when the fridge was bare, condensed into a word that made me sound like background noise in his real life. Brooke cleared her throat softly. "I'm so sorry, Miss Gilson. If you'd like, I can have someone bring you a slice of cake. To go." Cake. To go. As if frosting could replace my son's arm linked through mine, guiding me inside. The offer felt like laying a pretty bandage over something broken and pretending it healed. "I understand," I said, because anything more would have shattered my voice. Each polite phrase felt like a bruise forming beneath the skin. "I won't be a distraction." I turned before they could respond and walked toward the far end of the parking lot, where my faded Honda Civic sat squeezed between a black SUV and a silver Tesla. Every step away from the music felt heavier, as if my body grasped before my mind that something far larger than a ceremony had ended. Inside the car, the world dulled. The club's glass doors reflected string lights and moving figures, but here there was only silence and the tight ache in my throat. My hands trembled as I set the clutch on the passenger seat. For a long moment, I stared at the steering wheel. Then I reached back, fingers slipping beneath the lining of the trunk access panel until they found cool metal. The hidden compartment, the one thing no one here knew existed. I drew the small metal box forward until it rested behind my seat. I didn't open it, not yet. I simply held my hand on the lid, feeling its weight, the weight of every choice that had led me to make myself smaller than I am. Inside the club, someone laughed, the sound muffled by glass and distance. Out here, all I could hear clearly was my own heartbeat and the echo of Madison's voice telling me I didn't belong. I started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot and onto the road, the country club lights shrank in the rearview mirror. The resentment didn't fade with them. It stayed beside me, steady and watchful, all the way toward the dark stretch of freeway and home. By the time I climbed the stairs to my apartment in Chula Vista, the sky had gone fully dark, and my feet ached in that deep, familiar way that comes from too many hours standing and not enough rest. The building looked exactly as it always did. Peeling paint along the railings, a porch light that flickered more than it worked, a neighbor's television blaring through a thin wall. After standing outside that country club, it all felt even smaller. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and shut it behind me. The quiet closed in at once. No music, no laughter, just the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft rattle of the air vent. I slipped off my shoes, set my clutch on the counter, then went back down to the car to retrieve the metal box. It felt heavier than it should in my hands, as if it were filled with everything I had never said out loud. I placed it in the center of my wobbly kitchen table and pulled out a chair. The table rocked as I sat, and I steadied it with my palm, the way I always did. For a moment, I just stared at the box. Madison's voice came back to me, smooth and polite, talking about capacity limits and security, about how they couldn't just let people walk in because they say they're family. Sitting at my own table, I felt the sting all over again, as if her words were still hovering in the room. I had spent my entire life proving I was family. One sentence from her had erased it. I opened the box. Inside were neat stacks of documents tucked into clear sleeves, stock certificates, account statements, copies of legal papers. On top lay a worn letter with Gregory Hale's name printed in dark ink. I slid it free and unfolded it. I knew every line by heart, but I read it again anyway. "Dear Ms. Gilson," it began, formal, distant, never scarlet, not once. "We believe it would be in everyone's best interest to simplify the ownership structure of Hale Dynamics." Every time I read that sentence, a slow burn spread through my chest. Everyone's best interest. Everyone except me. Gregory had never asked what I wanted. He assumed, politely and confidently, that I should be grateful for whatever arrangement he decided was appropriate. Further down, he wrote about alleviating the burden of managing such a large position for someone like me. Those were his exact words, someone like me. Sitting at my chipped table, surrounded by mismatched chairs and a mug with a cracked handle, I felt that phrase crawl under my skin. Someone like me who worked nights at the Maple Street Diner. Someone like me who knew the regulars by name and counted tips and singles. He didn't see a woman capable of deciding for herself. He saw a problem to be moved off his desk. He had offered $12 million. At the time, the number had stunned me. Now, flipping through the newer statements showing how much my uncle's shares had grown, I saw the offer clearly for what it was, an insult wrapped in polished business language. I thought of Uncle Leonard, the way he had looked me straight in the eye when he signed everything over. "Don't let anyone push you off the board," he'd said. Gregory hadn't pushed with force. He had tried to do it with paper, courtesy, and a smile. My resentment wasn't loud. It didn't explode into anger. It sat quietly in my chest as I looked around the life I had chosen. The small apartment, the double shifts, the nights I came home too exhausted to do more than heat soup and fall asleep in my uniform. I had chosen that life because I wanted Dylan to grow up understanding work, not entitlement. And now, Madison had stood at a door and called me a distraction. Gregory had written as if I were a burden. Different people, same message, dressed in different words. I spread the papers across the table, my 55% of Hale Dynamics, the accounts totaling nearly $38 million, the letters meant to ease me out of the way. In that cramped kitchen, with the refrigerator humming beside me, I felt every slight, every smooth sentence that had tried to shrink me. They had no idea that the woman they excluded from a wedding and spoke down to in letters was the one holding the real leverage. For the first time that night, the resentment shifted. It hardened into something else, steady, deliberate. Not just pain, but a quiet refusal to ever allow myself to be treated as less than anyone again. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. It started before the sun had fully risen, the screen lighting my bedroom with that dull gray glow that comes just before daybreak. At first, I thought it was spam or a wrong number and let it ring. When it kept going, again and again, I understood. News travels fast when money is involved. I made coffee and carried the mug to the kitchen table, where the papers from the metal box were still spread out like a private map. My phone buzzed again. Dylan's name flashed across the screen. For a moment, my hand moved on instinct, ready to answer, ready to hear him say "Mom," the way he used to when he needed help with homework. Then I saw him in my mind, standing beside Madison while she told me I wasn't on the list. He hadn't even come to the door. The resentment stopped my hand. I let the call go. A voicemail notification appeared. I listened with the phone lying flat on the table, as if distance might soften it. His voice sounded strained and hurried. "Mom, I just heard what happened at the entrance. Madison said it was some kind of mix-up. Call me back, okay? Please don't do anything crazy with your shares or whatever. We can fix this." He didn't say, "I'm sorry I let her treat you like that." He didn't say, "I should have been there." He said mix-up. He said crazy. Every word told me exactly where his concern lay, not with me, but with the company, with money he had never cared about when he believed I didn't have any. Another voicemail followed, this one from Madison. Her voice was gentle and sweet, like sugar poured over something sour. "Scarlett, I think there was a misunderstanding last night. We just wanted everything to go smoothly. If you sell your stake, it could hurt Dylan and a lot of employees. I know you wouldn't want that on your conscience." That one hit hard. She had barred me from my own son's wedding, and now she was talking about my conscience. She had used my love for Dylan as leverage once, and she was doing it again. The unfairness settled into me like a fresh bruise. I had worked myself sick for years to give him a life, and somehow I was still being painted as the threat. Then Gregory's message came through, measured, professional, like he was speaking from a boardroom instead of the wreckage his family had created. "Ms. Gilson, I regret any discomfort you experienced last night. Emotions can run high at weddings. Let's keep a cool head. Selling to a rival firm would cause instability. I'm prepared to offer a fair increase over my last proposal if you wish to exit quietly." Exit quietly. Those words dragged me back years, to the day Mark walked out with a suitcase and said, "It'll be easier if I just go. Don't make this into a scene." They all wanted the same thing, my disappearance without noise, without resistance, without a voice. First my husband, now my son's new family. They didn't want me present, they wanted me silent. And in that moment, something finally shifted. I had spent years keeping the peace for Dylan. I could see now that my silence had only made it easier for people like Madison and Gregory to step over me. That afternoon, an unfamiliar Los Angeles number lit up my phone. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. "Ms. Gilson," the man said, "this is Adrian Cross. I believe we should talk about Hale dynamics." His tone was different. No false warmth, no moral pressure, just direct interest. We met in a glass office downtown, high above the freeway and the bay. He wasted no time. He laid out numbers, real ones. A buyout at a premium far beyond what Gregory had offered. If I sold him my 55%, he could guarantee control of the company. He didn't pretend to care about my feelings. He cared about the deal. Strangely, that honesty felt cleaner than Madison's smiles. Adrian spoke about unlocking value and new leadership. He explained how Gregory would be forced out, how the board would shift, how the family would lose the empire they'd always assumed was theirs. As he talked, I could picture it. The panic, the scrambling, the way Madison's smooth composure would finally crack. Part of me wanted it so badly it frightened me. After everything they'd done, it felt like justice. He slid the draft contract across the table. "Sign this," he said, "and they're finished." I took the papers, said I needed time, and left. I drove without thinking, freeway signs blurring past, my hands guiding me somewhere familiar. I didn't go home. I pulled into the parking lot of Maple Street Diner. The red letters of the sign glowed above the door, just as they always had. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and grilled onions. Nia looked up from the counter, surprised to see me out of uniform. "You okay, Ms. G?" she asked. I slid into a back booth and set the contract on the table. Dylan's messages, Madison's careful guilt, Gregory's polished pressure, Adrian's cold, tempting offer. All of it pressed in on me at once. With a single signature, I could ruin the Hales and walk away richer than I'd ever imagined. I thought of Dylan as a boy, sitting at this very counter, counting change with me, promising he'd never turn out like his father. I could have shouted, I could have signed and erased them all from my life. Instead, in the steady hum of the diner, I chose silence, just a little longer. Not for them this time, but for myself. Because if I was going to use this power, it had to be for something more than revenge. It had to mean something. Headlights washed over the stone pillars of the Hale mansion as I pulled up to the gate. The guard stepped out of his booth and squinted at my old Honda, like it had wandered in by mistake. I rolled down the window and gave my name. He checked his tablet, hesitated for a moment, then pressed a button. The gate slid open without a word. That brief pause took me straight back to the country club door, to being told I wasn't on the list. Tonight, though, they knew exactly who I was, and that made all the difference. I followed the long curve of the driveway past trimmed hedges and perfect palm trees. My car looked wrong at the bottom of those wide front steps, like it should have been turned away. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, my hand resting on the folder on the passenger seat. Inside were the trust documents my lawyer had already filed. On paper, they were simple. In real life, they were about to redraw every line in this family. The housekeeper opened the door before I could knock. "Ms. Gilson," she said quietly, her eyes a little too alert. "They're waiting in the living room." They, not your son, not the family, just they. I followed her down a hallway lined with framed photographs, Gregory cutting ribbons, Madison at charity galas, Dylan in suits I'd never seen him wear when he lived under my roof. Each smiling face felt like a reminder of how many rooms I had never been invited into. The living room was all glass and sharp angles, the ocean dark beyond the windows. Gregory stood near the fireplace with his hands in his pockets. Madison sat on the edge of a leather sofa, her eyes red. Dylan paced until he saw me, then stopped. For a moment, no one spoke. "Mom," Dylan said first, stepping toward me. "Thank you for coming." His voice shook, and I could hear how scared he was. I could also hear what he didn't say. He didn't say he should have stopped her at the door. He didn't say he should have walked out with me. Those missing words hurt more than anything he did say. "Scarlett," Gregory said, moving forward with a carefully measured expression, concern mixed with control. "We owe you an apology for how things were handled." The word "handled" landed wrong, as if this were a scheduling error instead of my exclusion from my son's wedding. Emotions ran high. "We value you, and we'd like to move past this." My resentment pressed up, steady and hot. He called it emotion, not choice. He hadn't been there when his daughter shut the door in my face, but he was here now, smoothing things over because the shares were at risk. I felt the difference clearly. Madison stood, wringing her hands. "Scarlett, I'm truly sorry," she said. "I never meant to hurt you. I was overwhelmed. There were so many details, and I handled things badly. You are important to Dylan. We just didn't think everything through." Important. Didn't think everything through. The same soft language, now paired with tears. She spoke as if it were a minor misstep, like misplacing place cards. She didn't mention looking me in the eye and deciding I didn't belong, even after I told her I was his mother. Hearing her shrink that moment into stress made the resentment rise in my throat. I walked farther into the room and set the folder on the glass coffee table. "I'm not here to talk about cake or seating charts," I said. My voice surprised me with how calm it sounded. "I'm here to talk about Hale dynamics and what happens next." Gregory's eyes went straight to the folder. "We understand you met with Adrian Cross," he said. "Selling to him would be a serious mistake. It would destabilize the company and hurt thousands of employees, including Dylan. Whatever issues exist, we can resolve them without bringing in a rival firm." There it was again. Issues instead of disrespect. We instead of names. Employees, optics, control, never once. What my daughter did was wrong. My resentment cooled into something sharper. This wasn't about right or wrong to him. It was about power. "I did meet with Adrian," I said. He made me a very good offer. Better than yours. I caught the flicker in Gregory's face, but I didn't sell. Madison exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Dylan stepped closer. So you're keeping it? He asked. We can fix this. We can bring you onto the board, show a united front, make things right. The word we cut differently now. Before, it meant him and Madison. Now it meant him and his parents, inviting me in, as long as I helped keep their world intact. Kinder pressure, but pressure all the same. I opened the folder and slid the top document toward them. I placed my shares into a trust, I said. It's already filed. I'm not selling to Adrian, I'm not selling to you, and I am not exiting quietly. Gregory picked up the document, his jaw tightening as he read. These conditions, he said slowly, are excessive. The word excessive hit me harder than I showed. I thought of every extra shift I'd worked so Dylan could go on school trips, every time I'd gone without so he wouldn't have to. No one had called that excessive. The moment I set limits, suddenly I was asking for too much. The conditions are clear, I said. Dylan leaves Hale Dynamics. He supports himself. He does meaningful community work for 5 years. If he does that, he inherits my stake and a significant portion of my estate. If he doesn't, it goes to charity. Madison stared at me. You'd really take that from him? She asked. After everything he's worked for? I almost laughed, but I didn't. I remembered him doing homework at my kitchen table while I folded uniforms, remembered paying for school, rent, cars. Their definition of worked for and mine had never matched. I'm not taking anything away, I said. I'm giving him a choice. He can become the kind of man who deserves that power, or he can watch it go to people who need it more. Dylan's voice cracked. Mom, please, I know I messed up. I was ashamed of where you worked. I let Madison push me into things. But this is my whole future. The admission hurt, sharp and deep, but it was honest. For the first time, no excuses, no polish. You still have a future, I told him. It just won't be handed to you for standing next to the right people. You'll have to build it. Gregory tried once more. We can adjust board seats, create a formal role for you, find a solution that doesn't involve these terms. It was his last attempt to turn this into a business deal. My resentment held me steady. No, I said. This is the solution. There's no negotiation. Silence filled the room. Outside, the ocean kept moving, indifferent and endless. I gathered the remaining copies of the trust, left one on Gregory's desk, and walked back through the hallway of smiling faces. They had built this house on the assumption that people like me would always wait at the door, always accept less. As I stepped into the night and walked toward my old Honda, I knew that assumption had ended. Tonight. City lights trailed behind me in the rearview mirror as I drove down the hill from La Jolla. The mansion faded into the distance, just another bright shape clinging to the cliffs, while my old Honda hummed steadily along the highway. The first thing I noticed was my hands on the wheel. They were steady. After everything that had just happened, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't fighting tears. I was simply steady. My phone lit up on the console every few minutes. First Dylan, then Madison, then a number I recognized from Gregory's office. I let each call roll into voicemail. Every ring felt like a tug, like hands reaching through the dark, trying to pull me back into the role I'd played for years. The quiet one, the forgiving one, the woman who always picked up and smoothed things over. I kept my eyes on the road instead, on the white line sliding beneath my headlights, and reminded myself that I didn't owe anyone an immediate answer anymore. At a red light, a text from Madison flashed on the screen. I glanced down just long enough to read the opening lines. Scarlett, we really think these conditions are extreme. Let's sit down and talk like family. This doesn't have to be so harsh. Harsh. The word settled in my mind like a stone. She had turned me away from my son's wedding with a polite smile and a guest list, but the moment I drew a boundary, I was the one being called harsh. Now she spoke of family, only after money and control were at stake. It felt like she believed she could rewrite that night at the country club door with a few soft sentences. Another message followed, this time from Gregory. We all said things we regret. Let's not let pride ruin what could still be a strong partnership. Think of the bigger picture. Pride, the bigger picture. His words were careful, every phrase measured. Beneath them, I heard the truth. Step back. Don't use the power you have. Make this easier for us. When I was working nights at Maple Street Diner counting coins to pay the electric bill, no one had told me to think about the bigger picture. Now that their comfort was threatened, suddenly I was the one expected to be reasonable. The unfairness of it settled deeper with every mile I drove. When I finally pulled into the cracked lot outside my apartment, everything looked exactly the same. The flickering porch light, the chipped concrete steps, the muffled sound of a neighbor's television through an open window. For years, those details had made me feel small, especially compared to places like the Hale Mansion. Tonight, stepping out of the car knowing those trust papers were already filed, this place felt different. It felt like mine, a life I had chosen, not one I had been quietly pushed into. Inside, I dropped my keys into the dish by the door and went straight to the kitchen. The table was still cluttered with statements and notes from my lawyer. I set my phone face down and put the kettle on. The simple routine, the click of the burner, the rising hiss, calmed me more than any promise Gregory had ever made. As the water heated, their voices replayed in my mind. Gregory calling my conditions excessive. Madison saying I was taking everything away from Dylan. Even Dylan, his voice raw, saying this was his whole future, as if I hadn't spent decades building my own. Each phrase had landed like a small cut, but beneath those cuts was something new, a clear certainty that I had the right to set terms for my own life, even if it made them uncomfortable. The kettle whistled. I poured hot water over a tea bag in my chipped mug and carried it to the table. Steam rose between me and the stack of papers that proved, in black and white, that I was not an extra on the edge of their story. I was holding the main line of it. For so long, I tied my worth to whether they let me in, whether they used the right words, whether they treated me like I mattered. Sitting there in my small kitchen, I understood something simple and solid. I mattered long before any of them said it, and I would still matter even if they never did. My phone vibrated again. A message from Dylan lit up the lock screen. I'll do it. I'll try. I don't know how yet, but I'll try. For the first time that night, my resentment softened, just a little. Not gone, not forgiven, but eased. Because there was no talk of stock prices or public image in that line. Just a son who finally understood he had something to prove, not to a boardroom, but to his mother. I didn't reply. Not yet. He would have 5 years to show me who he chose to become. I would give myself time too, to see whether his actions matched his words. I took a sip of tea and felt the warmth spread through my chest. For the first time in a long while, the quiet in my apartment didn't feel empty. It felt like space I had finally claimed. People might say I walked away from a perfect family. They might call me too firm, too proud, too stubborn. Let them. I know the truth. I didn't walk away from love. I walked away from a door that was never truly open to me and built one of my own. And if you've ever been told you don't belong at a table you helped pay for, remember this. You are allowed to stand up, step back, and choose yourself. Your story matters, no matter who tries to write you out of it.